coming will be a little bit late, but I think we should go on. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second training together. I'm Heidi from KVPS. Yeah, sorry,
but would like to record the session in Spanish, and I need you to allow me to record. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, Petteri will do that.
Me has leído la mente, Belén.
Yeah.
Sorry, for who I will admit the recording?
Belén, yeah.
Yes.
Belén, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Recording, thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, good. So I'm Heidi from KVPS Finland, and Simon and Keith will lead our training today, and Petteri will take care of the technical parts. And if you have questions, you can use the chat box, or we have also some time during the day for the questions and answers, so you can do it either way. And you can see the agenda of the day at the moment, and there will be 2 presentations from Simon and Keith, and after each presentation there will be national group discussions. And to these group discussions you have to go join by yourself, and if you have some problems, me and Petteri will help you, so I think we will manage. And after group discussion we have that question and answer time, so you can also ask directly from Simon and Keith, or just use the chat box also. And we have a translation to Spanish also, and if you have problems with that you can ask me or Petteri or Belén. Belén can also help you with that. So I think we have a great day again today, and Simon and Keith, you can take the lead.
Okay, thank you, Heidi. So it is welcome everyone, and nice to see all those people who I can see, and I'm sure it'd be very nice to see all those people I can't see, but I can only see so many people on screen, of course. I'm going to share my screen, and I have a presentation, and at the end of the presentation I'll also show a short film, just so that you've got something else at the end of my presentation before we go into the national group discussion. So I'm just going to try sharing my screen. Yeah, is that okay? Can people see that? Yeah, good. Okay. Okay, excellent. Okay, so I'm just going to say, as I said, today's workshop is titled Good Practice in Self-Directed Support. So that's what we're going to talk about, some elements of good practice in self-directed support. We won't obviously cover everything, but we're going to talk about some elements of what we consider good elements of some elements of what we consider good practice in self-directed support. First of all, I just wanted to say welcome again, as everybody is here. This is a slide that we used in a workshop that we did in May last year. So last year, at the start of the pandemic, we did a workshop for our skills partners about the experience in Scotland. And at that time, we were also at the very start of the pandemic saying to everybody, stay safe and stay well. So this is a welcome to everybody still saying stay safe and stay well. And I just really wanted to start out with just a little thought about, a really simple thought actually, about what good practice in self-directed support, what does that actually really mean? And for me, it simply means that the way we do things, which is the practice, helps people to get the right support that works for them so they can have a good life. So that's what good practice is all about, is to help people, enable people to get a good life. And I'm going to share this one with you. A very old, very old slide that we used in the early days of In Control Scotland. And it's really just saying what's all this about. And it's saying that independent living, equal citizenship, or a good life are the goal, the destination, the aim of what we're trying to achieve here for and with people. And we described self-directed support as the route to get there, and the budget as the vehicle that takes you along that route towards the goal of independent living, citizenship, and a good life. And this is just another way, another visual way of seeing that. And here's some of the images that we've used in the skills project previously. And again, just to very quickly go over independent living. Independent living means all disabled people having the same freedom, choice, dignity, and control as other citizens at home, at work, and in the community. So being clear, it doesn't mean living by yourself or fending for yourself. It means the right to the practical assistance and support to allow you to participate in society and live an ordinary life. And I've highlighted those 4 words: freedom, choice, dignity, and control, because I think they are the key essences, the key building blocks, the key elements of self-directed support. So freedom about how you organize your support and what you do, choice in the way that you live your life, dignity, you experience dignity in your care and support, and that you have control over what happens. So those are the key elements. And for me, citizenship is also simply about everybody having the same rights and responsibilities as equals, and to live safely and well as part of a community. So I'm going to go back to that presentation that we did in May 2020, 12 months ago. And I had 2 of my colleagues who often do training with me, Dr. Danielle Farrell, and I also had Debbie, who was with me as well, and they both spoke about what self-directed support means to me. So I'm just sharing one slide from each of their presentations, and Danielle said that self-directed support's given me choice in my life that I didn't previously have when she lived in residential care, and it's given me the flexibility to have support to do things I want to do when I want to do them. And it's also helped to build my confidence in being able to participate in my local community. And last year, when Danielle did that presentation, she told us a lot more about that. But I just wanted to put that one slide up just to highlight those key aspects again: flexibility, choice, confidence, and participating in her community. And Danielle organizes her support using both a direct payment and having support from an organization. So she does what in Scotland would be called a mixture of the 4 options of self-directed support. Oops, sorry, I've gone on before. Well. Oh, here we are. Okay, so this is Debbie Forsyth and her son Aaron. So when Debbie told us about what self-directed support means to us, she showed us some photos of Aaron and the good life that he was able to have doing things that he wanted to do, and how having that choice control, the freedom, the dignity, the choice control, the flexibility had allowed Aaron to flourish and to live the life that he wanted. And you can see him doing various things with people that he likes there. And he'd also recently at that point just moved into his own home. And just another slide, which again just says, what is self-directed support about? It's about the person, and it's about what works best for me. So often people talk about what matters most for me, and having those key elements that we described: flexibility, choice, and control. And now I'm just putting up a slide which at some point in the past I used to say, this is what my ukulele teacher used to say to me, but actually it's not really. It's just something that a musician, Pete Seeger, once said, and he said, any darn fool can make something complex. It takes a genius to make something simple. And if we want self-directed support to work in practice, we need it not to be complex. We need it to be simple and easy and achievable for everyone. In Scotland, we have both national policy and legislation and many years of practice. And you've probably heard in previous webinars us talking about the legislation in Scotland, and it's called the Social Care Self-Directed Support Scotland Act 2013, and it came into force in April 2014. So it's now more than 7 years since our legislation here in Scotland around self-directed support came into force, and it covers all of the 32 local authorities, 32 areas of local government that operate in Scotland. And it is about how people being able to direct and make informed choices about the care and support that they access and use. And in the legislation, there are duties and powers for all local government. And one of the duties that we mentioned is what's described in our legislation is the 4 options of self-directed support. So the 4 different ways in Scotland that people are described as being able to organise and manage their own support. But, okay, sorry, I'm just going to move on to the next one. And whenever we think about self-directed support, there are these things. There's the legislation, the law that describes the duties and expectations. There's the policy, the local and national plans of how we should do things. And then there's the way we do things, the practice. And where individuals and families experience self-directed support is in the practice. And that's why when we think about when we talk about self-directed support in Scotland, we say we actually have got quite good legislation, we've got quite good policy, but we have variable practice. So not all the practice yet demonstrates or embodies all of the aspirations that we would see in the legislation and in the policy. So I just really want to talk about some key features of self-directed support systems. And these could be all of the things that we would talk about today, but we probably won't get around to talking about all of them. But the key features of self-directed support systems. First one we've got here is an identified upfront indication of the resources available that can be used for planning how the person achieves what matters most to them. So this idea that early on in a process of thinking that you need some additional support, you have an idea, an indication of the level of funding that's available from your local government, in Scottish terms, your local authority. And that's what we describe as an upfront indication of the resources. In some places they call that an estimated budget. So that's the estimation of the sort of funding that's available. In other places they talk about an upfront indication of the resources or of the budget. So that's one of the key features of self-directed support systems that work. People know the level of resources that are available to them when they're working out, planning how to achieve what matters most to them. Second key feature is this idea of support system or ways of support that facilitate, enable, and help people to make choices, take control, and have flexibility in their support. And so the support system really describes the way that people are able to think and plan and develop their ideas to achieve what matters most to them. So for some people, that might be talking to somebody else who's already directing their own support. For other people, it might be working with their social worker or with somebody who's already involved in their support through a provider organization. And for others, it might be talking to a local organization that provides information, advice, and support. And it's important that there are a number of ways that people can access the right help and support for them to begin to plan and think about how they're going to take control, make choices, and have flexibility in their support. And the third key feature is this one, an absolute focus on outcomes, an absolute focus on what it is that you want to achieve. And that clearly requires, in any way, a change in culture and a shift in power. And maybe that's why when we talk about how legislation is in place, policies in place, but we haven't seen in Scotland as yet that transformational change in culture, which would mean that we could describe the practice of self-directed support as consistent and positive wherever you go. Now, recently we've had something called the Independent Review of Adult Social Care in Scotland, which has tried to address some of those aspects. This has been part of what the new Scottish Government will take forward in terms of their promotion of self-directed support. And I'm a hopeful person, and I continue to feel hopeful that the independent review and a number of other ways that the variable practice is being addressed will result in more people having more choice, more control, and the practice of self-directed support being more consistent. I'm just going to share another one, which really just again talks about the absolutes, the very, very boiled down of absolutes of self-directed support and what works. So this idea of the maximum flexibility of spend, so that people are able to make the most flexible choices of how they use any resources available to them, including a budget, as long as it can be seen to achieve what's wanted. And that's often in English described as the outcomes. And that's a really, really important idea, that people should be able to use their own, what would become their own money as flexibly as they need to. And the second one, which is again just a reworking of what I've said in the other one, is support in whatever way works for you to plan and think about how to use all your resources. So people need that access to some people need access to different types of support in order to plan and think about how they're going to achieve what matters most to them. And last time we heard from a number of different people from Scotland, and we could probably identify, for those people who are here, different things that were important to each of those individuals who came and spoke about their experiences of self-directed support. But the end point should be that support and services make sense to you as an individual and or you as you within your family. I think I do keep jumping on. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to use a graphic that Simon. It's a very old graphic now. It's probably a long time ago that this graphic was developed. But it's just showing us that when I talked about the essence of the key features or the essence, this is just a graphic way of describing those, I think. So it's identifying the idea of clarifying an entitlement to a budget very early on in the process. That's what we describe as the upfront allocation. that people use that to plan together and develop a description of what they want to achieve, often described as a support plan. That the way that plays out is doing what matters to you and getting that support within your community. But there is this absolute focus on achieving those outcomes rather than a focus on the way that you achieve those outcomes. So part of that is about deciding what is the available funding in any local authority for people with some need for additional support. For whatever reason, anyone with additional support, there will be a process for deciding what is the available funding from that local public body, in our terms, local authority. And the traditional way of doing it has been what's shown in the blocks at the top of the slide. So the idea that there would be an assessment that would lead to a care plan, and that would lead to services and support being priced up, costs being priced up, and something allocated to the person, something identified for the person. And what the self-directed support approach leads us to is some process, and it says here allocation questions, some process, not necessarily allocation questions, but some process that leads to an indicative budget very early on, and that's used to develop a plan of support to achieve the outcomes that mean the most to that person and or to their family. And there are lots of ways that so for example, in Scotland, there have been lots and lots of ways that the 32 local authorities have developed to identify what are the resources, what is the funding that's available for that individual or family. And in Control Scotland, we've been trying to do a bit of work around identifying if that's the case, well, it would be really good at least to have the key features any system should embody that would be used for allocating resources or the funding available from your local authority. So we've got 7 key features here that we describe, and these are just the key features. So behind this, it's quite easy to put together further descriptions. Well, what does that actually mean in practice? So the 7 key features are that any system should be empowering. So it should enable individuals and families to have power. And the way that would happen is that they would know their budget at an early stage in the process. In practice, what that means is that workers would also feel confident about being able to work with individuals and families to let them know their budget at that early stage in the process. So these are the key features, and then we're trying to describe the ways that in practice that would play out. Second key feature would be that any system would encourage creativity, would encourage people being able to use the available resources in the way that makes most sense to them. And one of the things in practice we would say about that would be that the budget would be described as an overall amount of funding rather than being described as traditionally it would have been done as an amount of hours of support that was available. And that would encourage creativity because it would allow and enable that individual and or family to say, well, actually, we think that by using that funding, this is the way that we want to do it, because that would make more sense to us. That would allow us to achieve what matters to us more than simply thinking thinking that that by describing a number of hours support, you would be able to achieve what you want to do. Now, it may be for some people that actually they decide that that's the way that they want to use their budget, obviously, that they want to buy a number of hours of support. But by having a budget described as an amount of money that's available rather than a number of hours, it encourages that idea that the people can do different things. And there are lots and lots, obviously, lots and lots of examples. Okay. Another key feature would be that it's sufficient, that it's enough, but not more than enough, so that the budget is enough when it's taken into account when it's considered alongside the person's own resources and own community and own the support that they get from their natural contacts and their family, that the budget's sufficient, it's enough and reasonable for them to be able to achieve the things that they want to achieve because of the additional support needs that they have. So it needs to be reasonable in that if you make a plan about what matters to you and how you're going to achieve it, that you have enough budget there to be able to do that. Fourth principle is that it's equitable. It's consistent and fair. And that means that that anyone with similar level of additional support and a similar level of circumstances in terms of the other resources that's available and would have a similar level of budget in your area. And that means that it is just this idea of consistency and fairness and equity. The fifth principle is that it's sustainable. It can be sustained over time, but also that in any area, some funding is available for what would be described as preventative support that allows that person to maintain their current situation and improve their current situation, which doesn't mean that all the money is only used on people with very, very high support needs and people whose situation is such that if they didn't get some support, their situation would deteriorate and not supported at all. So these are two elements of sustainable. It can be maintained over time, and also that some funding is available in any area for what would be described as preventative work. Sixth key feature is that it's transparent, that it's open, that it's easily understandable, that it can be changed, that everyone in the system understands how the way that the allocation of resources has been worked out. People can see how that's happened and can see the sense, can see the reason behind the way that it's worked out. And the last one is that it's efficient, so that any system is developed to have the minimum necessary bureaucracy for it to work well. So it's simple, it has minimal bureaucracy, and it means that money isn't unnecessarily spent on backroom systems that take away the resources that could be used for people living their lives. There are 7 key principles, and any system should have. And I was just going to share very, very quickly, I was going to share a recent example of work in an area in Scotland that was wanting to reinvigorate. So it was wanting to re-energize its work around the experience that people in that area who were wanting to direct their own support had. And this area was looking at how it could do that so that all children, young people and families in the area could have a better experience of directing their own support, a less restricted experience. So we've recently been working with them around a more transparent allocation of upfront funding that would be available and obvious to any family with who came to them where there were additional needs for either the family and or the child. And it was about, and the principles were about doing that to make the activity proportional to the amount of funding being discussed, so that if you were only likely to be able to access a small amount of funding, that it shouldn't take forever for the decisions to be made, and actually it should be part of what we would describe as delegated responsibilities, that decisions are taken as close as possible to the contact with those individuals, those families in this case. And it was set within the wider commitment of the information being developed, further developed and expanded again by that area's children's social work department. And in simple terms, really, any system is always going to be a balance of rules and professional judgment. So it's always going to be a balance of a way of doing things and the professional judgment of the social workers who are involved in doing those things. And this was just a small graphic that we used with that children's department, helping them to think about how that might work in practice for them. And again, just very quickly, I'm going to share, sorry, whoops. Oh. Okay. Yep, very quickly, I'm going to share the idea that what that leads to within that situation is the idea of some levels of support and the funding that would be available around those levels of support. So if it was a low level of support that was presented within the discussion with the social worker, that the responsibility would be for that individual worker to make decisions about a small amount of funding that will have an immediate or short-term impact. And as you see, as you go through that table, then the amounts become higher and the responsibility for decision-making changes as well. That's just an example of the beginning of a further discussion in an area to reinvigorate some of their work with children, young people and families. And it should lead to, the idea is it leads to this, an empowering approach, empowering individuals and families to make informed decisions and choices, making information available at an early stage, and being open and honest about how decisions are made and what the results of those decisions are, supporting people and families to be part of the process as opposed to simply recipients of decisions that are taken elsewhere and away from them. And I'm just coming back now to what's all this about. This is what it's all about. So whatever we do, these are the things that does it lead to the idea that people will have a good life? Does it lead to the idea that people will be able to achieve the goals of independent living and equal citizenship? And they're the key factors that we would think about when we're working with organizations or groups and or individuals and families, when we're thinking about the practice that we want to demonstrate and help to implement. So now I'm actually going to, now I thought, because I knew that I would be talking for quite a long time, I thought that I would quite like to show you just a short film. And it's so several years ago, shortly after the implementation of the legislation, in fact, we made some short films with some families just to share their experiences of what self-directed support meant to them and why it was important that they were able to have the freedom, dignity, choice and control that we talked about earlier. So I'm just going to show you one of those films before we move to those national groups. We are expecting that as lockdown restrictions ease, we have some more films that we have in the pipeline. We've got some more families who are eager and lined up, ready to share their stories. But obviously, at the moment, we are holding off from doing that. But I would hope in the next few months that we will have some new and updated films of family experience. But this film I'm going to share with you now is James's story, and I've put James's story so far because obviously he has moved on a bit now, because, as I say, it was shortly after the implementation of the legislation within Scotland. And afterwards, I'll also just very briefly talk a little bit about that, and then we'll move to our national groups. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen and start trying to hopefully share another screen, which will allow us to watch the film. At least I think it will. Okay. Oh no, that's not the right one. Sorry. Okay. Okay. I'm just okay, I'm going to try this now and hopefully this will work.
James is 12 years old and lives at home with his family in North Ayrshire. He suffers from epilepsy, as well as a rare genetic condition that affects his speech and movement.
James is a really happy little boy, and he loves the company of other people, particularly adults.
He loves playing. He will play with balls, cars, anything he can get his hands on. He loves the family. He just wants cuddles the whole time.
He loves getting up to mischief like most other young children do. He likes being active. He doesn't like sitting still and not being on the move. He does travel around in his wheelchair, but he's also got limited mobility as well, so he can walk holding onto our hands, but he loves crawling around. If he's at home, he'll just crawl around the house the whole time, getting up to mischief.
Prior to SDS, we were getting a package from the local authority, but the support hours and the respite hours are very inflexible. We were part of the initial pilot scheme for SDS a few years ago. Because we were not really getting what we needed from the support package we had, it was a really good time for us to consider doing something a bit different.
Flexibility is the absolute key word with it. It's just enabled us as a family to do a whole lot more. It wasn't just specifically for looking after James or for James to go away for us to get a break. It was very much how we can do the best for the family as a whole, whether that be when we go away on holiday, one of the support workers will come with us and assist us so that we can do things with Chloe that James wouldn't be able to do. But similarly, James can go away with a support worker and do things that are particularly targeted towards him. It makes things more relaxing because James does require 24-hour care. So it just gives us that little bit of time, but also James is getting the benefit of doing fun things as well. And you can tell from the reaction that he has when the support workers come into the house, he really enjoys it when they're there.
I think for James, the most important things are having support workers who can build a rapport with him, because James doesn't have any verbal communication. It needs to be someone who can tune into his way of communicating with the world, and being able to choose the support workers ourselves plays a massive part in that.
I've been working with him for about a year and a couple of months now. I've built up a really good relationship with James just through getting to know him. Like, you know what he's saying, what he's trying to point at, and you know what he wants before he even gets around to saying it, because you can just tell. But I've also built up a really good relationship, I'd say, with his family. We like going to kids' play, the soft play. If it's raining, that's where our go-to place, or the science centre, which he loves as well. If it's a sunny day, he loves going to Culzean and country parks, and we do lots of outdoor things and just trying different things that you might not get a chance to do that we think we can do with him.
It's really nice because I can't really go out by myself with him, but with Fiona it means that we can go out and have a coffee, or I don't know, just go out to shops, and it means that we can just kind of chill, and it just feels like a normal brother and sister kind of relationship.
Something we've really worked on over the last few years is getting James to build relationships with people in the community. And sometimes I think it's nice for him to do that with somebody a bit younger that's not with his mum and dad. You know, a typical 13-year-old or 12 or 13-year-old young man would be going out with his friends, and so he's able to go out into the community with someone who's a bit younger, who can go out and help him develop those relationships.
It's the smallest things that you wouldn't realise that are actually the ones that are the biggest things to the people around him. The more help that you can give him to integrate into his community, the more decisions he gets to make. The more I work, the more things you see that you know you're making a difference in his life. It's nice to see that he's making that progression.
I think James gets a lot more out of life. When a carer comes over, he will go out, he'll meet new people, he'll go to new places, and I think it really helps him. When you become older, you need those relationships with people, you need to be able to communicate with other people, and a lot of the time James hasn't had that. He's never had to communicate with another person to get something, even if it's just a stamp for a letter, and I think having that will help him towards his independence when he gets older.
No one knows where we're heading to, what the end game is, but from a day-to-day basis, then it is enabling James to constantly progress. He is constantly amazing us how he's progressing from one event to another.
Ultimately, we're always working towards independence. We're always striving to push James towards independent living skills and relationship building, etc. And the flexibility of SDS really helps us work towards those goals. For us, it has been transformative in terms of our everyday experiences, our outlook on the future, our family dynamic.
Find out the information about SDS, and flexibility is the key, not just from James's perspective, but also from how you actually go about administering it. You can either do what we do, which is take on most of the administration ourselves, or that can be offloaded onto a separate third party to take care of the administration for you. So you can really tailor it to be exactly how you want it. The flexibility just is amazing. It's definitely life-changing for us as a family. It's enabled us to do things that were completely impossible only a couple of years ago.
You can make it as complicated or as simple as you want, but if it gives you the flexibility that you need to have the life that you want for you and your child, it's a no-brainer.
James is 12 years old and lives at home with his family.
He suffers from epilepsy, as well as a...
Okay, so hopefully everybody could see and hear that okay. That was slightly stressful for me getting that started, but hopefully everybody could see it. Could people see and hear and see that okay? Yeah. Good.
Yeah. It went really
Thank you. That's great. That's great. I actually went on my phone just to check that it was working, and it seemed to be working, so that was good. Yeah, that's a film, as I say, that's a film that we made a few years ago, and James and his family are still directing their own support. They're still using a direct payment. He's gone through, he's grown, obviously. He's now doing some different things, and he actually left school at the end of the last school term, and he started doing a whole range of other bits of other things in his own community. Part of the reason why I wanted to share that story as well is that it's also had having choice, having support that's worked well, has had an impact on the family as a whole. And I just wanted to share very quickly the very last slide on here. There's a website for James's mum, Jenny Trott. Jenny's got her own website now, and she's also got her own YouTube channel where she has a whole range of different films that talk about all sorts of different things that might affect other families, other young people who have additional needs. She interviews people about how to set up a circle of support. She's talking about setting up a social enterprise for James to get involved in working there. So there's a whole range of really interesting films that you can find if you actually go to Jenny Trott's own website now. And that's something that she's been able to develop over the years as her experience has developed, as her life has changed, and as she herself and her family have felt that that's something that they wanted to do. So if you're interested in finding out more about that, then go to the website here, Jenny Trott, as well. Okay, so thanks everybody for listening. I'm going to stop sharing altogether. I'm going to invite Heidi to introduce the talking in your own groups and just remind people how we're going to do that.
Yeah, thank you. And before that, Simon, you can share your thoughts.
Yeah, I wanted to just add one and a half things. The idea of upfront money, an upfront budget, is still a bit controversial. There are still people who think, no, we should do all the planning and then we work out what the budget is. So although Keith and I are on the same position that it's much more powerful to give people the money up front, I think it's important to acknowledge that there is still disagreement globally on that issue. I think that for me, it is this issue of how you, and I'll talk a little bit about this in my talk, but it's a little bit about how you really give people and families the power. And I find it very difficult to understand how you can give people the power to make their own decisions if they don't know what the budget is. And I think if you don't know what the budget is, the danger is, it seems to me, that you leave people almost asking for things that they know the system does already. Does that make sense? So not talking about the budget always seems to end up being very conservative. It's not creative. That's maybe the half point, or three quarters of a point. The other thing I really wanted to stress here, because many of you are working in systems where you don't have a social work system that has already agreed that self-directed support is the way forward. And you might think, well, this doesn't apply to us. We don't have social workers going out doing assessments anyway. That's just not how it works. So I just want to do a little bit of time travel. So Keith really was starting in 2013 and the new legislation in Scotland. But before that, in 1996, we were working in Glasgow, getting people out of institutions in a system that, you know, wasn't thinking about self-directed support at all. But we were. So what we did was we took the money from the state system for people who were in the institutions, and we said, this is your budget. So we, and I'm talking now as a service provider, we started working in this way. I know in Finland, this is also what KVPS had to do when they were starting the process of piloting personal budgets. So I think this strategy is probably very important to people on the call. So when you go into your group, you know, you might think, oh, well, this is not relevant to us because we don't have the right laws, we don't have the right systems. But I would say, well, we figured out how to do this when we didn't have the right laws and we didn't have the right systems. If you're working with people and families now, then the question is, how can we give them real power? If there is money, it's somebody's controlling it. And how could you change the conversation about that money so that everybody has a little bit more power? And there are ways of doing that. So I don't want to dive into all the different things, but I think it's really important that you don't think it all depends on sorting out the law, because we only change the law by changing the practice first. So it was in Glasgow, we started proving that you could work in this way. And then we were able to show that some local authorities were able to start working in this way, some municipalities. And then we changed the law. And that process took 17 years. 17 painful but enjoyable years for me. But it's not, you can't wait. The change doesn't necessarily come unless you do the first work. Does that make sense? So just important, you can do something, whether you're in Greece, you're in Italy or Spain, you can do something because there's money being spent now. So how do you make a change now? I think is a key question. So is that okay, Keith? Do you want to come back on what I've just said?
No, I don't think so. I think it's that, like, I think as you rightly say, Simon, at the start of that, I think all those are really important points to think about. Think about what you can do now. I think the debate about at what point people are informed of the budget is still a debate that happens in lots of places in Scotland. And as you say, we would be encouraging everywhere to say people should know that budget as part of that upfront, as part of the thinking and planning about what's going to make the most difference to them. Yeah. Andreas has got his hand up as well.
Yes, I would like to. I have two questions, but maybe it's for the second part of this training or this session. But I had asked personally also Simon, because we have two very strong barriers to face, especially in my country, and the one is the philosophy around intellectual disability and disabilities in general, where you bring the idea of self-directed support and personal planning, but you have, on the other hand, very significant people and with a lot of experience and many years in this field saying that we are expressing an anxiety about giving the beneficiaries all this power to choose the service, choose the person, the support worker I'm going to work with. And I was shocked that this was negative for him. And he was representing a very big organization. And So my question is, how do you battle that? How do you, what are the correct tools to flip the script on these kind of people? And the second is, when you started the SDS, conversion in your countries, I know that laws and society and everything is run by money. So I assume that you presented also a very good cost transition to stakeholders and the government people and, you know, representatives of municipalities or ministries or whatever. So my question is, did you do a thorough financial report saying that, you know, these are the money you are spending on institutions, these are the money we need to spend on a personal centered plan, and compare it and, you know, show that the transition will also have a financial benefit? Because many people are thinking like that, you know. Many people are very very cold, and they're not very sensitive towards our field of work. So you have to convince them by speaking their own language, and usually it's the financial language.
So this is a really good topic, and I will say something, but I won't go into as much detail as I could do. I'll share a couple of links in the chat, Andreas, where we've written about these things. But probably I do want to stress, I think it's a little bit like an avalanche, like it's a small stone moving that creates the big change. I remember very vividly, because I'm going back to speak to the senior social service people in Scotland soon. They've asked me to come, and this will be now 26 years since I spoke to a group of people like this in Edinburgh in 1995, and I said, self-directed support, individualized funding, it's the way forward. And everybody looked at me completely blankly. Like, this is never going to happen. Never going to happen. And the reason we managed to make the change was because we started in a different place, I think. We started saying, where can we make the change? Where can we prove the change? And then we grew the process of change in different stages. So I think the conversation you have with the people in power, it's good to open a conversation, and you maybe get some engagement, but it won't be quick. They will only be persuaded when they start to see people in Greece, say, all going, hey, we want this. This makes sense. So it's never a rational change. It's might say a political change. It's a social change. And the social change comes around because you've found ways of changing the practice first. And suddenly then people go, I mean, and it's a very strange thing, Andreas, because actually it doesn't end up relying on lots and lots of evidence. There is some evidence, but it really becomes more like, oh yeah, that's kind of obvious. We should be doing that. It's very strange, the change. It is not quite what you expect. It's much more to do with the practice, changing the culture and almost the ideas, the community. It's growing a community of practice, maybe the practice and then the community of practice. And then it becomes much easier to change power and politics, because the weakness of the powerful is they depend on the practitioners. They depend on what's normalized. And when that starts to shift, then they shift. So does that make some sense? I mean, I will put some links in. We've written some things down exactly about this from the first skills project, actually. We wrote a paper about this. But yes, you have to really focus at the beginning on doing it. Whatever it takes, however sneaky, clever, disruptive you need to be, you need to do it. And then you figure out how to do it some more, and then some more. The theory, we say in English, cuts no mustard. I don't know how that translates, but theory does no work, really. And even evidence really doesn't do any work. It's practice that does the work, I think.
Yeah.
Keith,
thanks so much for that.
Keith, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, Simon. I think the thing about starting from where you are, making those alliances and making the changes that you can do with people who are enthusiastic. Sometimes I think, actually, let's not bother about those people who want to get in the way of it just now. Let's work with those people who want to make change happen, and then build that momentum or that avalanche, or however we want to call it. Because actually, sometimes people everybody gets their own light bulb moment, what we call a light bulb moment, where they actually can see the benefit of that in their own way. And sometimes people who you think have been very resistant to the ideas, when they hear a story or hear the experience or hear directly from a person whose life has changed considerably by being able to do different things, to direct their own support, to have choice, control and flexibility, that actually that happens really in a surprising way. So I definitely think start from where you are, make small changes, work with those people who want to change, where there is an impetus for change. My first experiences of helping people to direct their own support and self-directed support were in a local authority in 2008, where they were looking at making changes, and I would go out with the social workers, and the social workers would say, we don't really, that's not what we do around here. And my role simply was to say, it's not what you do around here now, but we can do that. And it was just about changing the way that things were thought of, as well as the way that things were talked about. And the only other thing I would say, I think, is that I remember very early on, Simon, from the early evidence from In Control was, there was, I can't remember exactly the phrase, but it often used to talk about the way that with the same money, people could achieve so much more, that the outcomes people could achieve, and that people's lives were so much better. And the evidence was showing that not by using any more money, but by using the same money, there could be such a difference in the way that people. Can you remember the exact quote there? I can't remember exactly what, but it was one that I used to use a lot in those days a long time ago, and it was with something like with the same money.
Yeah, I don't know. That was how we framed it. It was all about taking the existing money and using it better. Yeah. Taking, I use this slide sometimes. That the current systems spends people's money on things that they wouldn't buy for themselves, and what we were doing was allowing people to take that money and basically saying it is their money, let's see what they do with it, and hey, look, they do smarter, better things. But yeah, it was, I mean, this takes us also into deep waters, but basically, especially in the early days, it's a really smart thing to do, is just say, that's the money we've got, let's make it work. Yeah.
So Heidi, we have
okay. Yeah. Maybe we will go on to the national group discussions.